Hi everyone. The TD Ottawa Jazz Festival would like nothing more than to welcome you to our main stage at Confederation Park, downtown Ottawa. That's our home. But as we all know, that's not going to happen. So we've got the next best thing and are bringing the music to you through a series called Tenacity, which will unfold every day for the next 10 days and will feature some of the brightest and most unique artists from all over the world. You'll get to meet and hear artists from Berlin, New York, Boston, Vancouver, Ottawa, Serbia, and other places. This series is different. This series is jazz today. It's vibrant, courageous, tenacious, and masterfully original. Thanks for joining us. This is Jazz in 2020.
Good evening once again, and welcome to OLG Chats. I'm James Hale from Downbeat Magazine, and each day of Tenacity, I've been talking to some of the incredible improvising artists who shared their music with us. And tonight, we wrap the series up with a very special presentation that speaks to the times we're in, to the diversity of Ottawa's musical community, and most importantly, to freedom. In 1962, pianist Oscar Peterson was one of the world's most prominent jazz musicians. His trio with bassist Ray Brown and drummer Ed Thigpen was a major concert attraction. And on December the 15th, 1962, the trio went into a studio in Los Angeles to record what would become the album Night Train. It was 6 months before the murder of Medgar Evers, 8 months before the March on Washington, but the civil rights movement and the fight for freedom among people of color was front and center in Peterson's mind. The song Hymn to Freedom was Peterson's only composition on the album, and it held a prominent place as the closing track on Night Train. Tonight, Petr Cancura has gathered close to 40 Ottawa musicians to perform Hymn to Freedom, and we welcome 4 of them now, along with Petr. So welcome to Peter Hum, Mackenzie DeMilo, Angelique Francis, and Wayne Eagles. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, James.
Hi, James.
Peter Hum, sorry to cut you off. Peter Hum, if I can begin with you, could you take us back to 1962 and talk a bit about the kind of position that Oscar Peterson was in and the genesis of Hymn to Freedom?
Well, I guess at that time, Oscar is about 37 years old. He's born in 1925, and he is already firmly established as really the dominant figure in jazz piano at that time. And one measure of that, one of many that you could look at, would be the fact that between 1950 and 1970 in that esteemed publication Downbeat Magazine, the readers chose Oscar as the best pianist of the year 14 times during those 2 decades. So he really, in the popular imagination of jazz audiences, not just in North America, but beyond, Oscar Peterson was, the definition of a jazz pianist. He had already been recording prolifically and on the major label Verve, I think since the early 1950s. And he was touring internationally already at that time. So he burst onto the scene in his, mid-20s. And so by the time he comes to record Hymn to Freedom in 1962, he's really, ruling the roost, I guess. Now, you asked me about Hymn to Freedom in particular as well. I kind of rambled a bit there, but with respect to the position of that piece on the record, as you noted, James, it's the closing track, but it's not something that Oscar went into the studio thinking, well, this would be a really great closing track, because what happened, in fact, was that his friend and manager, the jazz impresario Norman Granz, said to Oscar, why don't you do something original for the recording, something with what Oscar said in an interview was something with quote unquote true blues feeling, which is an interesting way of putting things, because to me, Oscar's always playing the blues. But in fact, what happens is he does something off the cuff and it turns out to be Hymn to Freedom. with Ray and Ed, and it's one for the history books, I guess, even though it's a very off-the-cuff thing at the recording session.
Yeah. Now, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, my research shows Oscar hadn't really been that outspoken about race up to that time, had he?
That's my understanding as well. He was very happy to have Hymn to Freedom be chosen, I guess, as a civil rights anthem, but it's not something that he thought of beforehand. I mean, he had the title and he had the music very, very quickly, but it resonated so powerfully with the people who would take it close to their hearts as a anthem for social rights that it was I guess we'd call it a no-brainer now, but it was a very natural thing back then. Mm-hmm. And the lyrics, of course, came later.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of ironic because it was actually Norman Granz was very outspoken about racial issues, insisting that his artists, when he took them on tour, didn't play in segregated halls. He insisted that the halls be integrated, and as well as the accommodations, and really sort of set the tone for that time for touring artists. So,
right.
Yeah. Angelique, you come from a background of blues and soul music. How does Peterson's Hymn to Freedom speak to you as a cornerstone of Black music, and also a turning point in artists speaking out about civil rights?
Well, thank you so much for asking, James. This song is very meaningful to me, and I hold it very close to my heart. Growing up from age 12, when I would often sing and perform this song at celebrations of Black history and culture all over the country, it was here that I really saw the impact that it had, especially for Black Canadians. And as this piece is widely regarded as the Canadian Black national anthem and the international anthem for civil rights, I saw audience members crying and tears falling for the sorrows of the past and present, and crying with hope for the future. And that's what this song represents for many of us: hope for unity, peace, equality, and dignity for all humankind. And within this song, you could also find our culture, our feel, and our passions that have carried us through the most difficult of times, from the African diaspora to slavery to our long-going fight for justice. And in this piece, you can find blues, jazz, R&B, gospel, Negro spirituals, and many other elements that were forged in Black culture. I believe that this song is an important composition in the canon of Black music because of its meaning, its legacy, and its continued relevance. However, I do not believe that this was a turning point in Black artists speaking out about civil rights. This is something that has always been happening for decades, centuries even. The problem was that it always fell on deaf ears. And one of the reasons why Oscar Peterson's composition is so special was that he was able to relate to these songs, and a social topic in music that was often unseen or ignored. He helped to bring something so important to the forefront of mainstream popular music culture at the time. So I'm very glad that I was able to participate in this project, as it means so much to me as a Black Canadian.
Oh, thanks so much. That's so well put.
Thank you.
Wayne, I wonder if you could talk a bit about where Oscar fits into the continuum of Black music in Canada, particularly the community of Little Burgundy in Montreal, where he came from, which was a real hotbed of creative music and frequently hosted visiting American artists like Duke Ellington, who would go to the neighborhood to hang out.
Yeah, it was interesting, St. Henri and Little Burgundy, that area where he grew up. First of all, it was close to the train stations and so on, where a lot of Black Canadians worked and so on, including Oscar's father. And primarily an English area, it's where a lot of English Black Canadians settled and so on. So Oscar was playing music there. There were quite a few clubs, as you mentioned, in the area. Oscar's first teacher, I guess, was his sister Daisy, who was a well-regarded classical pianist. And also Lewis Cooper was from that area as well, right? I believe he was half Black, half Cree. So he was an important teacher to to Oscar. Oliver Jones came from that same area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great many, wonderful Black Canadian musicians, some well known, some lesser known. Um, Ottawa's D.D. Jackson, another person who grew up in a classical background first, has gone on to live in New York and work doing larger orchestrations for groups like The Roots. I remember going to see the Gateway Trio in Montreal when they reconvened in the 90s. I managed to talk my way backstage, and Sonny Greenwich was there,
Mm-hmm.
with Sonny Jr., who's another guitar player. And it was just quite amazing to see Dave Holland, Jack DeJohnette, and John Abercrombie just be so thrilled to see Sonny and exchanging numbers and so on. We had Roddy on yesterday. One of Roddy's big influences was Nelson Simons, who was in Montreal. Pretty under-recorded, but just a wonderful player. I saw him fairly late in life, I guess, at Biddle's. So there's Charlie Biddle, who moved from the States to make a career here, as did Vernon Isaac, who ended up in Ottawa in his last years. Just so many. RGLN. And Black musicians very early as well. We think of the classical Portia White in the early 20th century, Nathaniel Dent, who, like a lot of people in early Canadian music, was born here but ended up moving to the States for much of his career. But he was a composer and band leader. Mm-hmm. And the list goes on.
Yeah, and speaking of great guitarists, Lonnie Johnson moved to Canada at some point in his life, and those two people, Lonnie Johnson and Sonny Greenwich, are tied together because they're both figures that Mark Miller, the jazz writer, has portrayed. Mark's book on Sonny Greenwich has just come out, and a lot of the things that Wayne was just talking to about Sonny's background and Black music in Canada are reflected in Mark's new book. So, Mackenzie, let's talk about the music itself. What did you hear in it, and what was your approach to contributing your vocal parts?
Yeah, of course. So as Angelique highlighted, in the song, I hear so much hope. I hear it reflected in like the upward climb of the changes under "That's When We'll Be Free," and in their relationship with the melody that's both simple and clear, but enchantingly expressive at the same time. I also hear it in like the spiritual influence that shines so brightly through, and I don't know, there's something particularly heavenly, especially in the dynamic way that Mr. Peterson plays it. But I think I hear hope, even though they came later, but very, very clearly in Harriet Hamilton's lyrics, because they're so accessible and relatable, I think, to almost anyone, anywhere. And she seemed to really just capture the spirit and message of the arrangement pretty perfectly. But with regards to how I approached my vocals, before recording, I spent some time listening to different versions of the song, Oscar Peterson live on several different occasions, Dion Taylor with Dave Young and Oliver Jones, and Roby Botas as well. So I definitely took and stole some hints and solo ideas from them before sitting down to explore my own kind of interpretation of the song. But the overall content and just passionate call for equal civil rights that can be heard throughout the whole song, it continues so much. It's ever so relevant right now, especially in this moment in our society. So I thought if it's okay, that I would love to also just acknowledge some of the wonderful inspirations that have shaped the way that I approach like any and every song that I sing, not just this one, but Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Jill Scott, Erykah Badu, these amazing artists of color just collectively have molded me into the vocalist that I am today, along with local legends Roxanne Goodman and Kelly Lee Evans, who we all love so much. They both inspired me to explore jazz more intimately in my time in university, while my dear bandmate, and I think everyone's probably dear bandmate, Clayton Connell, not only teaches me something every time we play together, but also was my introduction to him to freedom when he played it so magnificently at his grad recital, I don't know, 6 years ago or something like that. So I think if I know that's more of a maybe emotional side of it, but I would have to say that kind of those experiences and those influences more than anything really kind of inspired and helped me to approach my vocal from a place of love and hopefully awareness and with open and listening ears. So it was an honor to take part, but yeah, those are all part of it for me.
Oh, thank you so much. Finally, Petr Cancura, wrap things up by talking about your vision for this collage, as you're calling it, how it came together and who's performing.
I mean, it's great to hear just in this little talk of how everybody kind of approaches and feels this this piece. I just want to mention that as I was listening to everybody. But on your question, I think this piece was kind of in the spirit of the whole series of Tenacity, which was really to bring people from varied areas of life and the world together to create music, especially in this isolating time. So the goal of the particular goal of this piece was to highlight the musicians of Ottawa and its many different scenes. On that note, the scenes, I think what we would call the Ottawa scene, I spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking to a lot of people to try to decide who we're going to pick for this, because it could really easily be a symphony of 100 or 150 musicians, because the scene is big, and it has what we call the jazz scene right now is many branches. And I feel like every year those branches get stronger and stronger, which means I think artists get more and more specialized a lot of times, which also means that sometimes they don't end up playing together. So this was kind of an opportunity to highlight some people from all these different scenes that might not necessarily play together. Some do, of course. And I think Julian has a slide that he can play right now of the 39 musicians we ended up going with. So you can see kind of everybody who's playing. And then we also hemmed and hawed about which song to pick. And so we decided to pick Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom, which everybody here has so far talked about. And of course it has this powerful message of the fight, of inequality, but it also has this wonderful message of freedom of expression and unity and bringing people together. So one thing I think I really appreciated is how much everybody really poured their heart into this song. Just listening to Mackenzie talk, how she checked out all these different versions, and I think I can really hear everybody did that, and everybody brought themselves to the table, and that was really inspiring. I do have to say, when I ended up with just mountains and mountains of audio and video files, I was like, what am I going to do with this? And honestly spent weeks with this, kind of piecing it together as its own piece, trying to kind of highlight everybody and show the heart that everybody has brought in. And to that end, if I could kind of add on, James, to this, all the musicians poured their hearts into this, but I wanted to mention, as this is the last in our Tenacity series, all the amount of people that poured their heart into this whole series, the whole festival staff, the amount that goes into making this look easy is huge. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of collective hours to dealing with the audio, with video, media relationships, to technical aspects, the hours of sound checks to make this look like it's done off the cuff, dealing with sponsorship. We have a couple of people driving gear to different houses to make this all happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know, it's kind of a really nice way to round this all out. So it's about the song's about the 39 musicians who make part of the scene, but there's so many people that that make up the scene, whether it's Tenacity or Ottawa.
All right. Thanks, Peter. And thanks to everyone on the panel tonight. So tonight's presentation is dedicated to Black Lives Matter, to the memory of all those who gave their lives in the cause of freedom, and to the Black art form that we all love. So this is Hymn to Freedom.
Music brings us together even when we're apart. That's why we're so proud to support Canadian music through events like the TD Ottawa Jazz Festival. It's just one more way that the TD Ready commitment is building a more inclusive tomorrow. Enjoy the show.
You've been listening to musicians from all parts of Ottawa's musical community performing Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom. We hope you've enjoyed this Tenacity presentation, and we sincerely hope you've enjoyed everything we brought to you over the past 10 days. If you've missed anything at all, you can find it in the archives at ottawajazzfestival.com. So it's time for some thank yous to Catherine O'Grady, who had the vision, to Petr Cancura, who brought the musicians together, to Jackie, Alicia, and everyone behind the scenes at the TD Ottawa Jazz Festival. A very special thank you to Daryl Latinma, Sarah Hodgsons, and Natalie Nalawi for their editing and animation work. So many musicians, including our panel tonight who were talking off camera, so many musicians we worked with have commented on how gorgeous that work has been. So thank you to you three especially. And finally, my huge personal thanks to Julian Saloti and Samantha Hindle, who have kept us all looking and sounding good. You guys are the best technical crew I could possibly imagine working with. And thanks to everybody who's been joining us online. That's all for this evening and this year. I'm James Hale. As always, stay cool, keep supporting the music, and good night.
Love, keep me by your side. Love, lift us higher and higher. Oh, love, 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 love, lift us higher, higher.
Vas-y.